that's where I wanted to tune into. This is where I need to keep my focus.
This week, we ended up recognizing and, I guess, accepting the value of what we're calling interruptive insights, both for us as authors and for our characters, and even as a theme for our readers.
And this is something that we each experienced in kind of our own ways this week. And for me, it came specifically from the writing, putting words on paper process, but yours was more along the brainstorming, planning.
Right. I mentioned before that I have been reading through the book Deep Work by Cal Newport, and one of the exercises there was to plan ahead and prepare so that during times of physical activity that doesn't require mental activity, that you would have some mental activity to really concentrate on and use that physical time for deep work. I had planned to take some of my workout time and shower time and other parts of life that were more physical activity focused, and decided to choose specific things that I would think about, whether for the novel or for a nonfiction book that I'm writing. And what I discovered was that during those times of physical activity that didn't require concentration, my mind ended up gravitating towards other topics that were more philosophical, exploring what do I believe, double checking and comparing things to really evaluate truth in some areas that I recognize in hindsight were actually more important than progress on getting topics for books was.
And with mine, it was, I was writing a scene with Arnold after he's processing a very new experience of someone communicating to him via the genetic modification that he has, and he's finding out that somebody else has as well. And Arnold is kind of experiencing this. I'm also experiencing that same kind of thing, and kind of coming at this from a different angle, taking a step back first. We recognize as authors that in science fiction, in fantasy genres, there's an expectation that the author will communicate a message that goes beyond just the story. Something deeper, something philosophical, political, religious, something along those lines. There's
the kinds of things that were actually great.
Right, exactly. Yes, those types of things are expected to be communicated as some sort of subtext in a science fiction or a fantasy novel. And so, kind of coming back to our story here, Arnold has experienced this new thing, and he's trying to, it's again an unexpected interruption, and we were trying to figure out how do we go about explaining what this is like for him to experience this new form of communication. And we came up with two very similar but slightly different analogies to explain it. You go ahead and give yours.
So when you were describing this new part of the scene, I saw it where as Arnold's capability allows him to essentially hear genetic activity as background noise, what Vanessa was doing and deliberately using that, she was communicating something very orderly and focused in a similar way that the satellites used for SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, can hear a lot of background noise, but when they discover something that seems to have order, then they will focus in on that and start paying attention. And so that was really the metaphor that came up for me as you were describing that.
And I heard that from you and kind of, I guess, went to the opposite side of the same coin, and was thinking about somebody like building their own radio. And as they're going through the process of tuning it and getting everything exactly right there's a lot of static that they're hearing at first. And then once they finally get it tuned into that specific, any specific channel that somebody is broadcasting on, then everything becomes clear, and you hear it like, that's where I wanted to tune into. This is where I need to keep my focus, so that way I can actually participate in the communication there.
And then as we saw how each of us was coming at this from a different angle, we realized this is a metaphor for all of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that human beings communicate to each other, whoever is speaking needs to be able to communicate on a frequency that the listener can hear. And the listener, once they hear that somebody's communicating on a particular frequency, they need to have the discipline to zoom in and concentrate on that frequency to hear the message. Just like we as authors need to understand the broad communication style of science fiction and fantasy as genres to make sure we're tuned to speak on a frequency that our listeners can hear.
And then the listeners, or readers in this case,
Right.
I guess, understanding that there is that expectation of subtext, deeper message in science fiction fantasy, they will be looking for that and will be able to see that when it comes up. And then on a little bit deeper level, there is that expectation of the genre as a whole, but with specific writers, each writer does it a little bit differently. So as you read a writer's works more, you get better at understanding how they're communicating that subtext and that deeper message. And while this is our first book that we're working on, and we don't have that history of building that communication style, we have this YouTube channel.
Right.
And we're giving you the cheat sheet to how we're going to be doing some of these things, and a little bit of an idea of what topics to be looking for when the book comes out. So you already have that idea of how we're going to be communicating these deeper things.
Right. So you get to see the subtext or the themes of parent-child communication, of belonging versus fitting in, and now of the two different tunings of communication that will fit in there somewhere. But thinking about that deeper level of communication as a theme wasn't something that we were planning on considering this week. It just kind of came up for us as we were going about the other things that we intended to do. And even that is a theme that we can share with readers at a deeper level than just that surface story. So our question for you this week is, how have you seen what we're calling interruptive insights occurring for you in your life? Let us know that in the comments, and we will see you again next week.